In the Big Poppy slot here, our third storyteller evening, bring this wonderful energy that you seem to be having all night for Bert Cushman. Where are you, Bert? There he is.
So it was August 1975, and I had just turned 12, and I was sitting next to my annoying 10-year-old brother in a great big DC-10 packed with people, and I was not looking forward to this flight. For my birthday, I had gotten 2 science fiction books, and I'd gotten a book of puzzles, and I'd gotten a book of dinosaurs. But my brother didn't like to read. He probably wanted to spend the whole time talking about how recently he'd started beating me all the time in tennis and backgammon, or perhaps about his upcoming baseball season. Baseball, Jesus. In any case, I was not looking forward to the trip. Mysteriously, my mom had been unable to get a seat next to us. She was happily back in the end of the plane, reading a book, but she assured us that we would be perfect gentlemen this whole trip, and I was not so sure. In any case, I was temporarily distracted by the fact that at the front of the cabin, there was this TV showing us the cockpit. And so we could watch as the pilots went through their checklists, and we could watch as they went through and talked to the control tower, and we could watch as they pushed that big throttle forward, and we felt the whole plane surging down the runway. Now, just when the plane hit about 60 or 70 miles an hour, there was a sudden bang, and the whole plane lurched. And the next thing I knew, the pilot slammed on the brakes, and I was thrown against my seatbelt. In the TV, I could see that we were approaching the end of the runway very quickly, and at the end of the runway, there were a set of metal pylons that looked pretty sturdy. Now, fortunately, the pilot knew what to do, and he avoided the pylons by turning off to the left of the runway, and the plane came to rest with the left wing down in a ditch with a retaining pond, and the right wing pointing up at the sky. At this point, a passenger on the left side of the plane leapt up and shouted, "Nobody panic!" And I thought, wow, that's counterproductive. What I didn't know was that as the landing gear on the left side had collapsed, the engine had been dragging on the ground and had caught on fire. Fortunately, the flight attendants did not panic. They all leapt up and threw open all the doors of the airplane, except the one over the burning wing. And we all started to look for doors. The closest one to me was the door in the middle of the plane on the right side, but no one was moving over there. And so gradually I joined the line of people over on the left side and started going that way. When suddenly the pilot came on and asked all of us to move to the right side of the plane because the plane was slipping farther into the retaining pond. So dutifully I turned around and headed back to the right side, but when I got to the door, I realized why no one was going out. Because the plane was tipped so far over, the slides didn't reach the ground. They were just hanging into empty space. And so going out the right side of the plane meant dropping 20 feet onto the tarmac below, and I wasn't really willing to do that. At this point, the flight attendant in the back left side of the plane suddenly had no passengers going out of her slide. And so she screamed across the cabin, "Everybody come over to this slide! It's gonna blow!" Well, with that, my brother leapt up onto the arm of the chair next to us, onto the backs of the seats, and ran all the way across the cabin from seat back to seat back. I don't know about you, but I hate people who cut in line. What a weasel. I also probably thought that if I had tried that, I would have wiped out halfway across and ended up stuck between the seats. In any case, at this point, the fire trucks had arrived, and I could see the whole side of the plane was being covered with foam. And so I very casually walked with the rest of the people down, and when I got to the slide, I jumped off the slide and I slid down to the bottom where I was reunited with my mother and my brother. We wandered a little way off of the runway, and as we were standing there, I looked down and I saw the most amazing thing. There, on the ground, where people almost never go, was a stone with a perfect trilobite fossil in it. I picked it up, I looked at my fossil, I looked at this giant plane tipped on its side with the slides all dangling out, covered with foam, surrounded by fire trucks and milling people, and I was filled with this one emotion. That was awesome! This was the best day ever. It was quite a few years later when I began to realize, you know, you were pretty stupid. That was actually a really dangerous time. But I was just a 12-year-old kid having a really great adventure. I spent that afternoon trying to look traumatized for the television reporters that had showed up at the airport. But they weren't going to interview a 12-year-old kid. The airline offered my mom train tickets back to San Francisco instead of taking a plane. But she muttered something about being trapped with the two of us for 3 days, and she promptly volunteered to get on the very next flight. Which is how, just a few hours later, I found myself sitting next to my brother again, heading down another runway. I thought, I'm going to throw a scare into him. And so I leaned over and I said, I sure hope we make it this time. My brother was completely unfazed. But out of the darkness next to me, a haggard-looking man turned at me and said, Jesus, kid, will you shut up? Thank you.